How do you put your own personal spin on a published scenario? Today on Out of Character. Hi, and welcome to Out of Character. I'm Jason Corley.
I'm Derek Rex.
I'm Scott Forrester.
And assisting us today with engineering is Aaron Lee Newburn.
Hello.
Today, before we jump into putting our own spin on a published scenario, which I know is a topic that Derek is champing at the bit to talk about, I wanted to quickly give a shout out to the Cannon Puncture podcast that recently did an entire show where one of the GMs of their group, Arnold, he kind of started out talking about Jade Claw tricks and tips, and everyone's familiar with Jade Claw, right?
No.
It's a anthropomorphic fantasy RPG, so all of the characters are foxes and bears and things like that.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, but actually the podcast turned into like this really good description of GM's techniques and tips and tricks and so on. So if you haven't been listening to Cannon Puncture Podcast, get over there right now and listen to Arnold's Jade Claw Tips and Tricks episode. And one of the things that and they also shout out to us, which is the other reason that they're cool.
No.
They are cool.
Yes, we like them.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing that he talked about was personalizing NPCs in the game that were published to his own game. So I thought that we'd talk about one of our favorite topics, which is how do you make a published scenario your own? Obviously, virtually all role-playing games have published scenarios of various kinds, modules, campaigns, whatever. How do you make it fit your group? What are some very specific things that you guys do when you're running your own version of a published scenario?
Well, the first thing, you cannot be a slave to what somebody else has written. Obviously, you liked what they had.
Right.
They've got some good ideas in there. They've taken a lot of the creative process and done the heavy lifting for you. But don't figure that I don't like this, but I got to go with it because it's written in the module. Right. Chuck it. If you don't like it, don't hesitate to get rid of it. All right.
So you have to identify what in the module specifically you like, whether that's a character, whether that's a location, whether that's a conflict.
Right. I do the same thing. I mean, you look at it and you see the pieces you like. I like this plot line, but I hate that encounter, and I hate this rationale. You know, I've had. I often run from a pre-published adventure, and I've had adventures where they're like, well, when the group decides that this guy is the one who did it, and then they chase him through this planar portal to another world, and then that's when the next thing happens. I'm like, I need to construct some hooks here, and I need to build a structure, you know, a little bit of sloppy
Or
writing
otherwise they're going to ally with the guy and go somewhere else. I'm
totally fine with that, but if they're just wandering the city burning down warehouses because they don't know which way to go, that's a problem.
Well, and it is, and this is, it kind of mirrors what I was saying. The very first thing, if you're looking at a published module, to identify, to throw it away, is what Jason has always said are the worst words that you can ever find in any sort of published module, which are...
No matter what the players do, comma, anytime you see that in a module, that's an alert, like the siren above your head should start spinning, Drudge style, because that is the spot where the module writer gave up.
Yep.
They gave up on role-playing.
Right.
So Derek, I see that you brought some
I did.
examples.
I wanted to illustrate a couple of things what I've done. This is the module, The Last Warhulk for the Alternity. It was a Star Wars space opera type setting that TSR had put out. Very much liked it. As a matter of fact, anybody who's played 3rd edition Dungeon Dragon 3.5 Pathfinder will recognize with this system some of the
this was right before the 3rd edition came out, so they were basically prototyping a lot of mechanics.
So anyway, the module itself is about, it's called The Last Warhulk, and it's about this sentient warship left over from a war that ended many, many years ago, and it was able to self-repair, and it's ready to resume its mission, which was the annihilation of the enemy, who for decades now has been friends with the nation that the Last Warhulk came on. Lots of things in there. There's a little bit of, there's some NPCs who are betrayers. This is the book, Bear Island, from Alistair MacLean. Right, set right after World War II here in modern day, Earth, roughly. And it's about a bunch of people going on a ship to this deserted island in the North Sea, and terrible things are going to happen to them, and there's a lot of intrigue and espionage and stuff like this. there's a lot of great ideas that are in this book that could be incorporated into The Last War Hulk if I decided to change, what was written in there and start to throw away.
How do you specifically pull something from that novel and make it work in that?
First thing I thought of was, while The Last War Hulk has one person who betrays, the group, this book has half a boatload full of people who betray. So if you're looking for the scapegoats, the bad people,
must be an Alistair MacLean novel.
You got lots of choices in this one. As a matter of fact, I've even contemplated that one of the player characters that would be on The Last War Hulk would indeed be one of the betrayers. Maybe not having drunk the Kool-Aid and be completely committed, but wouldn't that be an interesting concept to say that
you're the one that's kind of working against the party?
You got the pre-generate. Now, that only works on pre-generate or if I get with the player ahead of time to do that. But that's an example of where I've taken a novel with a few ideas and thrown in there. The big deal was, how do I do this in modern day world? It's an isolated ship out there. Communications are there. SATCOM is there. GPS is available. It wasn't back in this time. But you know what? Go into a space opera where you're millions of light years away from whatever and just play with the communication device, ruin one, bam. And now we got isolation.
So in both of those books, isolation is a key element. So you were able to find things that were similar between what you wanted to adapt and what the published material was. And using that concept, you were able to link those together.
Right. So, and here it's sort of forced, but again, could we do this in a more modern day setting here on present day Earth? Absolutely. We just have to make sure that I've built in a reason for the players to say, not to say rather, screw this, we're calling the cops. Okay? We're getting out of this. And I've had that happen in games before where, people were playing merchants and they had the opportunity to get into some intrigue and they were like, no.
I think
this is going to ruin our bottom line.
One thing that I would do in a situation like that is, let's say you have a concept like isolation or betrayal or whatever it happens to be, and you're not sure if the players are going to buy into it or not. One thing that you might do is when you're creating the scenario with them, build it in. So what if in a modern day setting, they were going to search for some kind of super weapon that was buried after, the Russians collapsed or whatever.
Right.
And they're mercenaries and they're espionage agents and maybe there's some military people and they are ordered strictly, you must keep at all costs, this is secret. And so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to knock out every cell tower in the province.
Right.
So that's the first thing you're going to do. And so if you make it part of what they did, then when they can't communicate, they feel like it's an accomplishment, not necessarily just a difficulty.
Right.
So. And in that case, you've actually gotten your player characters to do the work that you thought an NPC was going to do for you.
Right.
In the story.
I love when that happens. They talk about this guy is going to talk to this and make this happen. And like, you know what? I don't know. This isn't the story of the NPC off screen who made this other stuff happen. So often I will do that. I'll make those opportunities available to the players and, like you said, get them to do things. It's the story of your players, not the story of the other people. And I love the adaptation. I do that a lot with my adaptation. I read somewhere that as a dungeon master, as a game master, it's not your job to make a fascinating original story. It's your job to be entertaining.
Right.
And if you steal something entertaining and present it to your group and they're entertained, nobody cares that they've heard that story 5 times before because now they're playing it instead of just watching someone else.
But there's also a chance they may not recognize that they've heard this story. All right, I'm going to recommend that you don't have an NPC come up and go, "No, John, I'm your father."
Right.
Skip that one.
And here's a ring. Please go destroy it.
But beyond that, it's amazing how many small insertions you can make out of popular culture, books you've read, movies you've seen,
a character,
whatever, anything
voice.
like that.
StudyTVTropes.com. Steal everything you can.
And
it's what Shakespeare did.
That's right.
Steal from TVTropes.com.
Wikipedia told me so.
Nice. So one thing that I wanted to bring up was in getting players to do things, making it part of their actions rather than part of the scenario and the situation. A a lot of times in published scenarios, the villain has established this, sort of elaborate plan. They've gathered all of these resources and they've made sort of this supposedly unbeatable plan to take over, destroy the world, the kingdom, whatever.
Right.
And the players then come in and on the side of light and goodness, dismantle that.
Right.
One thing that I've tried to do is to say, well, okay, rather than have the villain create this huge elaborate plan, can I invert the scenario so that the villain is the plucky rebel who's trying to tear down the good institution and, get the players to do that? Like if the villain's going to take over the justice system, maybe the player characters are vigilantes who are trying to make the justice system work despite its flaws. And, by giving them something to protect instead of something to attack, that's a way that you can take a published scenario and just flip it on its ear, where you can use the exact same stats, exact same locations, but the goals of the characters involved are going to be more matched to what the player characters in my game want to do.
Right.
And that's a great point, because how many times have we run a game and we anticipated what our group would do, and they surprise us
every time?
What makes this person who wrote this any better suited to anticipate what my players are going to do?
They're worse. They've never met them.
Exactly.
I've gotten really lucky in my campaign that the main NPC who's supposed to be giving out missions died like 6 months ago, but the players and their characters are so hooked that they are themselves taking on the missions that would be given to them just when the situations come up. They're like, we're going to go take care of that.
You know what else they can do? If you get lower level scenarios, have the player characters assign NPCs to go handle those other problems.
That happened actually Sunday. The one guy's the sheriff of a town. There was, we think there's something weird going on in this neighboring town. I'm sending my deputies. I'm like, okay, 2 weeks later, you haven't heard from them.
But if you want to do it another way, you can have them come back and say, yeah, we solved it.
Right.
We leveled up and we got this magic sword. But whatever it happens to be, because that also invests them in their deputies.
Right.
Now when the deputies go out the next time and maybe they have some trouble, now that's a big deal that they didn't come back.
That was actually part of the deputy thing. I was like, well, we can run a couple of off, lower level adventures. Let's play them out. Everybody take, a simpler, everybody gets a deputy and let's go do that. You can play a different character. We don't have to leave the world and leave the game system. We never ended up doing that, but it was a fun idea.
That is cool. You should try that sometime. All right, so if you've done something like that, if you've had good success with adapting a published scenario for your own ideas, your own group, if you've been able to find themes like Derek was able to in his novel and The Last War Hulk, if you're able to find other opportunities for NPCs like Scott was able to in his game, talk to us about it on Twitter. You can talk to us about it on Facebook. You can post in the comments on YouTube or on pulpgamer.com. And join us next week when we'll be talking about how you portray a lady when you're a dude or vice versa. See you then.
pulpgamer.com